Today we discuss RJ Barrett outdueling Luka Doncic and leading Team Canada into the semifinals of the FIBA World Cup. We talk about Team USA taking on Germany on the other side of the bracket, and then a big trade proposal from one of our listeners. Could the Knicks get Joel Embiid and James Harden? That next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. If you want to become an everyday on the YouTube side, all you have to do is hit that notifications bell and subscribe so you never, ever miss an episode. And be sure to do the same on your favorite audio platform of choice. And if you want to talk to Alex and I, you can now do so. Hit the link in the episode description. We're using this new service called Subtext where you guys can text us wherever you want. Knicks questions, Knicks thoughts. And you get our thoughts back immediately after games, immediately after big trades, all that good stuff. But who's talking to you? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And today we are talking about your favorite Canadian RJ Barrett, 24 points, 9 rebounds, teaming up with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who was even better, 31, 10, and 4 to help lead Team Canada yesterday to a 100-89 victory over Luka Doncic and Slovenia. Just a all-time RJ game. Not hyper efficient, was just 9 for 22, missed a couple of shots late. I think he even noted as much in his post-game comments, but he, given the stage, I think one of the most important games of his young career. And I think what defined it is what generally defines all the best RJ performances. He was completely fearless. He was playing like he believed on a court with two guys who have made first-team All-NBAs before the age of 25, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Luka Doncic. He was playing like, all right, I'm the best guy on this floor. I was the highest pick out of the three of us. I'm going to go carry my team to victory. And during some pivotal stretches, he was Canada's best player. He scored 9 points in the first in the first 6.5 minutes of the third quarter. And I think what stood out in terms of how he scored the basketball was just how explosive he was. I don't know if people remember this, but back when RJ was at Duke, him and Zion Williamson, ironically enough, in Canada, maybe that was a little recruiting trick for Mike Krzyzewski. Duke did this preseason tour, and this video leaked out of RJ and Zion having a dunk contest, but from the foul line. And I remember watching that and then thinking back on it when the Knicks drafted RJ Barrett. I said, all right, whatever concerns I have about this guy's efficiency, he is just a monster top tier athlete. And then you've watched him his first 4 seasons on the Knicks, and is it 5 seasons now? Jeez, time's flying by. He's obviously has moments where you're like, wow, he can really dunk the basketball. But I would say, if anything, his athleticism has been a little bit of a disappointment on the NBA level, and not necessarily what you would typically associate with the guy who was the top-ranked recruit in the country and was a top 3 pick in the NBA draft. And I would say this game was about as explosive as I've seen RJ look post his Duke career, and particularly in the half court. If you go back to the second quarter, there was one play where RJ got a dribble handoff, turned the corner, 1 step or maybe 2 steps inside the foul line, took off and finished with his head at the rim or pretty close to it. And that's something, at least during the regular season, I don't really remember seeing from RJ in the half court. When he's a long runway, sure, he can throw down a monster dunk. But what typically, I don't even want to say held him back, because RJ's obviously generally a pretty good finisher in the half court. But if there's a concern about RJ, it's his touch, right? And last year it got a bit better, but at points in his career, he has been one of the worst in the NBA, finishing at the rim for his position. And touch goes out the window when you can just jump over someone and dunk in their face. And I think the more of that we get from RJ, obviously the more efficient he's going to be, but also the more confident we're going to be with him soaking up possessions on a team with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. So I thought that was big. I thought RJ also showed some really good savvy at points in this game, attacking Luka Doncic when he was on him, trying to wear him out in transition. I talked about Rokas Jokubaitis doing this trick, but you don't see RJ pull this off all that often. It was a 1-on-2 where RJ was the one, but he had a guy trailing him, and RJ intentionally slowed down, bumped the guy, something you see Emmanuel Quickly, Jalen Brunson do all the time. And kind of in doing so, stalled the defender up that would have been there for the chase down block, and then just sprinted into the body of the ensuing defender and finished right through him. So that was exciting. He finished on the right side. He finished on the left side, hit a couple big threes, had this awesome backdoor cut for a two-handed dunk late. That was kind of the final nail in the coffin. And then the actual final nail in the coffin was RJ chasing down an offensive rebound after Slovenia had cut the lead to 9, kicked it out to SGA, who got an and one and ultimately put this game away. And those plays stand out to me because it's not RJ being the hero. It's not RJ being the Maple Mamba, as he was dubbed out of school, right? It's making those little extra plays that we saw him make throughout the Knicks playoff run that ultimately give all of us some confidence that RJ can actually be the third guy on this team this year. And when I say that, I don't mean that in terms of being the Knicks' third leading scorer. I mean that in terms of like playing into the role of being the third best player in the starting lineup. And that means sometimes on nights when he's hot, like he'll be the alpha, he'll be the go-to scorer, but it means hitting a corner three. It means making a hustle play to get an offensive rebound. It means particularly when Isaiah Hartenstein's in the game, cutting off the ball and getting easy buckets that way, something that we saw, I would say, exponentially increase in the second half of the year. There was some really, really great stuff from RJ Barrett in this game. The other takeaway from a Knicks perspective, loosely from a Knicks perspective in this game, for me, was Luka Doncic and maybe a bit of a sour taste in my mouth in terms of him potentially being a Knick down the road. And now that is still obviously very much a pipe dream for myself and Knicks fans everywhere. But it is something that we talk about, that we speculate about, because obviously he is sort of the best prospective free agent, even or trade target, even a couple years down the road, given his talent and his age. But I kind of question, is there someone on Team USA who could be better? Is Anthony Edwards that guy? Is maybe, despite the positional overlap with Jalen Brunson, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander eventually that guy? Because, man, does Luka Doncic really like to complain? And that was kind of the defining factor of this game for Slovenia. I'll say this just from a play perspective. I don't think he was 100% in this game, and I'm almost surprised that wasn't more part of the post-game conversation. Like he just did not look nearly as aggressive, nearly as explosive as he did in the earlier rounds of this tournament. And honestly, I think if anything won this game for Canada, that was it. But I think that compounded with how Dylan Brooks, always an irritant, was defending him, really got under Luka's skin. Luka eventually got ejected with about 4 minutes left in this game. And you just had to watch him complain and essentially be a giant Slovenian baby throughout the latter portions of this game. And honestly, it was kind of a tough watch. And it always leads back to that concept of the superstar who is nominally a good passer, who's nominally unselfish in some ways, which Luka definitely is. But ultimately, it's kind of all about him. And they have to be the star, and they have to be the center of attention. And it is just the direct opposite of a Steph Curry, a Tim Duncan, heck, a Jalen Brunson, where it is always about the team over everything else. And I wonder if there is some level of, look, I was going to use the term moral rot in Dallas that is overstating what's going wrong with Luka and probably understating what has gone on in that front office. But that is a story for another day. Point being, I think there are detrimental effects to having a star that is all about themselves, and that's not breaking any news. But I do think sometimes people underrate the impact of that. We're going to get into some Team USA semifinal talk and a little bit more Team Canada semifinal talk before talking about a big potential trade for the Knicks. If they can get both Joel Embiid and James Harden. But before I do that, I have to take a second and tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. And it's time to get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because the NFL is back tonight. Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Detroit Lions. I personally am going to be glued to my TV for that one. I'm so happy we finally have football back. And right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. One player prop I'm looking for tonight, I drafted Sky Moore for my fantasy team. You might be saying, Gavin, didn't he only have like 220 yards as a rookie? Yeah, and then Kansas City let their entire receiving core go. I don't think Travis Kelce's going to play tonight. Someone has to get those yards. He's playing with one of the 5 or so best quarterbacks in the history of football. I'm ready to say that in Patrick Mahomes. I'm pretty confident that Sky Moore is going to finish this game with more like 70 or 80 yards. And now we're close to 43.5 yards. So I think that is some easy money. So now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything, as I just noted. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, we told you about FanDuel. Now let's tell you about Team USA taking on Germany at 8:30 tomorrow. By the way, that Canada game starts at about 4:30 in the morning. I think I am leaning towards right now just DVRing that game. Maybe waking up at a cool 6:30, 6:45 and checking it out then, but probably not earlier than that. But Team USA Germany, we talked about it a little bit the other day, excuse me. And I kind of talked about it as if it was a foregone conclusion that they were going to beat Latvia. That was very much not the case. Dennis Schroeder shot one of the ugliest lines you will ever see, 4 for 26 from the field, presumably. And unfortunately for Team USA, got that out of his system. It'll be a lot better in that game. And a Latvia team that has pulled off upset after upset in this tournament, knocking off France, knocking off Spain. Nearly did so a third time against the heavily favored Germans, but a Davis Bertans shot did not go down late, so Germany just snuck by. And I think in some ways that's good news for Team USA. We've seen them have their issues with the likes of Montenegro, Lithuania, and not to say that Latvia is the same team, especially because they don't have a Jonas Valanciunas or a Nikola Vucevic, but there were certainly some aspects of Latvia's game, particularly just the sheer amount of shooting that they have, that I think would have put a lot of stress on Team USA. And I thought Latvia also had a connectivity and a level of belief that you have to worry about. And just kind of the makings of, all right, is this just going to be the ultimate Cinderella story and something that we're going to see a million sports documentaries about 5 to 20 years down the road? But now Latvia's out. And instead the U.S. plays the team that's simply been the best in the FIBA World Cup so far. Germany is 6-0. And gave the U.S. obviously all they could handle in the preliminary games, or I guess the exhibition games would be the better way to term it. We're up by 18 points. Anthony Edwards, 34-point performance, single-handedly carried Team USA to a win in that one. And I think there are a couple of keys for the U.S. I mean, one, I think will likely need a similar performance out of Anthony Edwards, who was very quiet against Italy, made a very conscious effort to pass the ball more, and only finished with 3 points on 6 shots. I think somewhere in the middle is probably the right spot for Ant to aim for in this type of game, in this type of stage. And I think he'll do a good job striking that balance. The other thing is I think your favorite New York Knicks, Jalen Brunson, is going to have to step up in this game. And I was watching what Shai did the last 2 games for Canada, where he combined for 59 points. And it kind of left me wondering, because I think Jalen Brunson is that type of talent. I think he's capable of that type of performance. Obviously, there's not as much of a need for him to have that type of performance on Team USA with all the scoring talent they have across the board. And yet, I think him having one of those games could propel the U.S. And it's a little bit different than a Brandon Ingram, but I think Jalen has had some similar issues balancing out his game, right? Because with the Knicks, his role is very clear. He is a score first, score second, score third guard. And yes, he has to spread the ball around. He has to get easy shots for Mitchell Robinson, for Quentin Grimes, ideally for RJ Barrett. Ideally, we'll have some 2-man synergy with Julius Randle. But there's not a lot of ambiguity about what he's doing on the court. With Team USA, Steve Kerr is asking him to be a little bit more of a playmaker. And that's why at times Kerr has gone with Tyrese Halliburton during important stretches. Because I think for Halliburton, it's a little bit less ambiguous because he is inherently such a pass-first guy. And that is sort of the direction. Like if you're talking about 2K sliders, that is where you're going to start applying all the points for Tyrese Halliburton. But I think it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for Jalen to lean into some of his selfishness, to go at Dennis Schroeder to go at this German defense because he is right there with Edwards, so the guy who can create the best and most efficient shots on this U.S. team. And I think he, at some point, whether it's this game or whether it's a potential championship against either Canada or Serbia, they're going to need Jalen to just rip off 8 points in a row. And I just hope that he kind of remembers, like, hey, I'm that guy. I'm very much capable of doing that. The other thing for the U.S., which they really leaned into in the Italy game, is maintaining their pace, maintaining their pressure. Brian Windhorst released an article today talking about how the film study coming out of the Lithuania game, the emphasis for the U.S. staff was ultimately, hey, we are not going to win games by out-physicaling teams and out-rebounding them and dominating in the or at least dominating with our bigs in the paint on both ends of the floor, right? We can lean into that a little bit more, and the rebounding certainly has to get better, but ultimately we have to do better than what other teams do well. And I think that's going to be a significant factor against a Germany team that is going to pound the U.S. a little bit on the glass, right? Daniel Tice is going to get some cleanups and some putbacks in this game. Mo Wagner is going to space the floor from three, and if the U.S. crashes too hard on guys like Schroeder, he's going to make them pay a little bit, and he's going to get some big rebounds. And guys like Isaac Bonga, or I think that's how you pronounce his name, my fault if it's not, are going to crash the boards and are going to make big play after big play on the glass. Franz Wagner at 6'10", the U.S. is probably going to have some issues boxing him out, right? We can get to in just a sec, but I think they're going to have to play Paolo Banchero a little bit more at the 3 or 4 to try and slow him down. Point being, the U.S. should apply a whole lot of ball pressure. They should really up the tempo in this game, and I think in doing so, they can ultimately outscore the Germans. And in doing so, could potentially set up a dream matchup with Team Canada in the FIBA finals, which would be a lot of fun. Canada going to have their hands full with Bojan Bogdanovic, and Serbia, a team that is obviously missing Nikola Jokic, but does have Nikola Jovic, who is trying to single-handedly push the Damian Lillard trade through. With his FIBA performance, he has mostly been excellent. And Bogdanovic, a bona fide scorer, that is a viciously tough team who is not going to be afraid of Canada in the slightest. They beat Lithuania, who knocked off the U.S. by 18. So they are a threat, and that will be an interesting game. And there can't be any letdown for Canada after beating a Slovenia team that was, again, I think, for my money, with Luka at less than 100%. We will be back in just a sec. I want to go over a trade that got proposed to us on Twitter where the Knicks could potentially net not 1 star from the Sixers, but 2. That next on Locked On Knicks. All right, guys, here's the deal. It comes from Connor Gallagher at Connor_73, and he wants to know, if the 76ers blow it up, how insane is it to acquire both Harden and Embiid? Let them get more than just what they'd get for Embiid and walk back from their quote-unquote line on Harden. So it's Embiid and Harden going to the Knicks. RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, Evan Fournier, Isaiah Hartenstein, Grimes, Quickly, and 3 firsts. Obviously, losing 5 rotation guys hurts bad, but McBride and Sims can slide in as backups. Then it's just how well can Randall handle being a 4th fiddle. If you want to swap Randall for Barrett, I'd prefer that, but doubt Philly would require him. So my dream version of that deal would be one where you somehow were able to keep Quentin Grimes, and you could trade RJ and trade Randall and be left with a lineup of Brunson, Grimes, Harden, I guess Josh Hart probably as your 4, and Joel Embiid. That is obviously a very small team, and maybe the Knicks would have to trade Grimes for Josh Hart for a power forward, maybe a Josh Hart for Bobby Portis trade would be in the works, something along those lines. It would be interesting. But let's just say we do Connor's trade, right? And you're left with Brunson, Grimes, Hart, Randall, and Embiid. Is that a team that can win a title? Probably, just on sheer talent. And your bench at that point is Hart, Deuce, Hartenstein. Maybe you get Rokas to come over and DiVincenzo. Yeah, that's a team that could probably go win a championship. You're betting on a very limited window with James Harden. You're hoping he doesn't fall off any more from last season. The good news is you just have so much shooting and playmaking between him and Brunson, right? I mean, that's obviously an even better version of the Maxey Harden backcourt in Philly a year ago. I don't think Randall would fall by the wayside the same way that Tobias Harris does on the Sixers, but that would be your fear there. I think the key would be that you're emphasizing to Joel Embiid, one, that he's going to take a lot of time off in the regular season, because we mentioned this when we've talked about Embiid trade before, but the biggest thing is having him be as close to 100% as healthy as possible going to the postseason. And to me, if that means you're going to end up being the 5th or 6th seed and Embiid is just sitting the last 14 games of the year to preserve his health, I honestly don't have any issue with that. And frankly, I think Philly would have been wise to pursue that strategy in past years. I love the amount of shooting that you have again with Harden and Brunson. Randall would be more of a floor spacer. I think you'd have to emphasize to Joel that the biggest thing he could provide is not leading the NBA in scoring for the 3rd straight year, but making a run at Defensive Player of the Year. And I think if he leaned into that part of his game and then had some bigger scoring performances come playoff time, that would be the way you could make this all work. But ultimately, it all kind of breaks down if Embiid isn't the best defensive player in basketball, because you're playing 3 just absolutely terrible defenders in Brunson, Harden, and maybe a little bit less terrible, but still pretty bad in Randall. And you're hoping that Hart and Embiid and your second unit can make up for that. In terms of sheer talent, totally capable of winning a championship. Have we seen anything from James Harden and Joel Embiid that make you think they can actually execute on that stage and get it done? Probably not. If the Knicks made that kind of deal, I'd ultimately be okay with it, right? Because how many tries do you really get at an NBA championship? And I think that would put the Knicks in the inner circle of contenders. It would be very painful to walk away from Quickly, Grimes, Mitch, and all those picks, and RJ to maybe just a slightly lesser extent. But yeah, it would be painful to walk away from RJ too. I think the sheer amount of talent justifies the trade. Would it ultimately work out? That is very, very questionable, but that will probably never happen, so we most likely don't have to worry about it. We'll be back with one more episode this week on Locked On Knicks, probably breaking down the FIBA semifinals. Maybe we get to Giannis and the Bucks this week. If not, we'll do that early next week. But until then, I'm Gavin Schall, and we will talk to you all soon on my favorite podcast in the world, Locked On Knicks.